Hey everybody, this is Pooka back with another game I played on the Pokemon Trading Card Game Online. This time my opponent is SRSRSRSR. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so trying out an Emboar deck this time. You know, Emboar, it's always seemed like that card that's had so much potential. I mean, you can just start raining energy down on all your Pokemon. There's a lot of good Pokemon that can use fire energy. You got Reshiram, Reshiram EX, Rayquaza EX. You can even do Mewtwo if you want to. There's another Emboar that does 150. There's all these different Pokemon you can use. Problem is, it just takes a whole lot of cards to pull it off. So we're going to find out if we can actually pull some stuff off with Emboar. The biggest problem with the deck has always been, well, that card that he just played, which is N. Originally, the big problem was Judge. Now the problem is N, because in order to use this deck properly, most of your Pokemon end up actually discarding the energy you attach to them. For example, Reshiram discards energy, Rayquaza discards energy. Those are going to be your big attackers a lot of the time. So as the game goes on, you're going to have to discard the energy, and then you need more and more and more from your hand in order to keep attacking. So it really just depends on what you draw as the game goes on. If you can keep drawing into your energy, then you can win. Some of the other problems with Emboar happen to be its gigantic 4 retreat cost. Just happens to be a big catcher target. So whenever you actually get it out, people catcher it out. And if you don't have a switch, it's probably going to get knocked out. And then you need to get another one into play, which is really tough. So obviously there are a lot of problems with Emboar. But that being said, if you can get everything going, it's actually a super strong deck. You can knock out pretty much anything in one hit. You can counter pretty much everything because you have so many different Pokemon, so many different attacking options. We'll see how it works out though. So my hand was pretty dead. I played a Silent to get 3 energy, and I put an Eelektrik on the Rayquaza EX because, like, you know, I don't want to just get picked at by a Zekrom outraging me. So I might as well just throw an Eelektrik on it. Now, he is playing a Zekrom Eelektrik deck. I don't know if he plays Rayquaza himself. If he does, this could be really dangerous, but otherwise there's nothing that really knocks out Rayquaza very well. It's just weak to Dragon, has 170 hit points, and there's not much in the game that can trade with it efficiently besides other Dragon Pokemon. You know, if you can get a Mewtwo with a ton of energy, that can maybe knock it out in one hit, but otherwise Rayquaza is pretty safe. It is kind of the main focus of this deck because you can just dump so many energy on it and you can knock anything out in one hit. When the focus of the format is all EX Pokemon for the most part, being able to just load up a Rayquaza and go and just snag 2 prizes out of nowhere, that's such a big deal. Now, my opponent also plays down a couple Eeveelites, which is pretty good for me, or pretty bad for me. That makes it so that Rayquaza has to discard more energy. That's not what I want. I want to be able to just discard like 3 energy to knock out an EX. The biggest problem you have is running out of energy, or just finding them in general. So you need to find ways to conserve energy as much as possible, which is why you can't just use Blue Flare over and over. You're just going to fizzle out at some point. So that's why in this deck I run Reshiram EX as well as Mewtwo EX. Those are Pokemon that, once you put the energy on them, you can keep attacking. You don't have to worry about refueling them after you discard the first time for their attack. So you need to find a good balance of stuff that keeps discarding and stuff that just, you load them up once and go with it. Now here, he actually did end me into quite a perfect hand. I will get this Emboar into play. It's a ridiculous start for this deck. Getting Emboar into play is also a hurdle. I've like understated how hard that can be sometimes. And as we can see, this deck relies on what's in your hand more than any other deck. And I have no energy in my hand. So even though I'll be able to get this, I think it's a turn 2 Emboar, I won't be able to do anything with it. I do want to be able to take a prize here though, and kind of put the pressure on my opponent. So I think I should probably catch out that Dynamo. I'll be able to knock it out with Dragon Burst for 60, and hopefully I top deck something from there. So let's just go ahead, catch out the Dynamo. I don't really have any other options. Maybe a prize will give me a supporter, and I'll be able to start getting back on track. Even when you get the Emboar out, even when you get your setup, you still need to draw the energy, which is what separates this from, for example, an Eelektrik deck. once you get the Eelektrik into play and there's some energy in your discard pile, you are set for the rest of the game. And that's all there is to it. Here, the most feared thing that can happen with this deck just happened. He catchered out my Emboar. It's kind of stuck there. I do have a switch, but I don't really want to play it until I can switch and then power something else up. There's no real point if I'm just going to switch and pass. I might as well just wait until I can switch and knock something out. Otherwise, he's just going to catcher out Emboar again, and I'm going to have to switch again, and then I might just run out of switches, and eventually my Emboar will get stuck up there, and I will lose the game. Because if you don't have Emboar, you can't power up your Pokemon, and you lose. That's how it goes. So here, once again, I don't have energy. I don't have any ways to get energy. Even if I drew an energy retrieval, it would only get me 1 fire. So I'm in a really bad spot. Ton of energy are left in my deck, and I don't have any of them in my hand. So you can see, I'm just going to level ball for a Tepig to thin out my deck. I might as well play that down as well. Just because, hey, I need another way to get an Emboar out in case he knocks out my active one. Which is a possibility. He could knock it out this turn. But at this point, I don't really care. I might as well just pass. The odds of him having a lightning and a plus power, not too high. A lot of decks don't even play plus power anymore. They usually play like 2 if they do play it. Without Junk Arm, plus power becomes a lot harder to justify playing in your deck, because you might have to Juniper it away, and then you don't have it for later. Whereas cards like Eviolite, you can just attach them, and then you don't have to worry about it. That's why those get higher priority nowadays. But people do still play plus power. It's just not as likely anymore. And even if he knocks out my Emboar, not like Emboar's doing me any good right now. I don't really have anything in my hand. But he does end me, and uh-oh, I don't have my switch anymore. And hey, there's all my energy. But now I just can't do anything with my Pokemon because the Emboar is stuck. So as I was trying to explain earlier, Emboar is just kind of this deck where you need all of these perfect things to go your way, otherwise you can't do anything about it. In this situation, I'm just going to make the best of what I got. I'm going to dump all my energy before the Emboar gets knocked out next turn, because I might as well do that. So I'm just going to drop a couple energy on the Rayquaza EX, and then I might drop one on the Reshiram as well, just to give myself some options, so I can maybe just set it up, threaten an Outrage if he decides to attack into it. It's going to be my way of buying time, maybe. It's not good to keep powering up other stuff when those are the things that are going to be discarding energy later. You might as well power up something that can keep doing something with a low amount of energy, which is what Outrage can give you. So at this point, I am pretty screwed, if I must say. I have no way to switch that Emboar out. I have no supporters. And he's got, well, close to a full setup. He's got an Eelektrik out. I would assume another one's coming pretty soon. And the scariest part is that Raikou EX, because my Emboar is active. And when it's active, my other Pokemon can't attack. So what's going to happen is he's just going to keep using Volt Bolt to hit my bench. And there's a whole lot of nothing I can do about it. With that 4 retreat cost, Emboar, he's just sitting there waiting for something to happen, because he's certainly not moving. God forbid Emboar moves. But yeah, Raikou EX can do 100 damage to a bench Pokemon, and eventually that'll just knock out all of my bench Pokemon, and I'll probably lose. That is one way this could play out, which is very scary for me. Raikou EX is a very good card. So he's going to Super Rod, shuffles a Dynamo back in. Usually that signals that he plays a Juniper this turn. Yep, there we go. So he's going to go ahead and he discards 2 Lightning and a Catcher, which is fortunate for me, and a Max Potion, which I don't know how much that'll do. So he does get 2 more Lightning Energy in the discard pile, which is going to let him to Dynamotor twice onto his Raikou EX. And then he'll be able to Volt Bolt this turn, and he's got a whole slew of options here. He could knock out the Tepig, which would be a good option because my Emboar is stuck active. He can knock out the Tepig, and then next turn knock out the Emboar. which means I'm left with no energy acceleration, and I'm probably going to lose, because I also discarded a Tepig earlier. The other option is to target down one of the EXs, maybe that Rayquaza with the 3 energy, or the Rayquaza with the no energy. Even knocking out my Emboar hurts at this point. The only thing that would be bad is hitting Reshiram for 100. Anything else is actually a viable play. So let's see what he decides to use Volt Bolt on. You can choose any Pokemon to do 100 damage to. The only problem I have with hitting the Rayquaza with all the energy is it does have an Eviolite on it, so it would only do 80. That would require him to have a catcher and then Bolt Strike it next turn. It's definitely a route he could go down, but it's probably not the ideal one. Whereas you could set up one Rayquaza to get hit for 100 and then Volt Bolt it again later, and then you get your 2 prizes that way without having to waste a catcher. But he decides to hit the Rayquaza for 80, which is fine too. Either way, it's going to set up a knockout. And at this point, I drew a Charon, which was fortunate for me. But now I'm going to look through my deck. I didn't really draw much. I didn't draw a Switch. That was the main card I was looking for. I would have needed a Switch and 2 energy, actually, to get a knockout here. But a Switch in general would have been nice. And here I do draw a Max Potion. I could heal off that Rayquaza, but I don't think it's worth it. It's going to end up discarding all the energy with it. Even though I'm giving up 2 prizes, I would rather heal my Emboar, because that's more of a valuable resource for me. If Emboar goes down, I cannot really do anything. I can't power up my Pokemon. So, I want to keep that alive at all costs. I actually would rather give up 2 prizes than lose my Emboar, because if I can't power up my Pokemon, I'm not going to win anyway. Sometimes you got to look at the big picture. Now, it would have made it much more difficult for him to take all these 6 prizes, but, you know, that's not always a big deal. Sometimes you have to just think about the board position, and actually he had to waste another catcher doing that as well. So that's going to benefit me a lot too. In the future, I won't have to worry about Emboar getting catchered more, because I believe he's played 2 or 3 already. Keep in mind, without Junk Arm, you can't use catcher freely. You really have to make them count, otherwise they're just going to be wasted. You only get 4 opportunities to do it now. No more 8 catchers in a game. I'm really happy about that, actually. But now it makes cards like Emboar a little safer, at least, because if your opponent only gets 4 catchers to work with, they have to use them wisely. And they don't always want to just use them to bring up Emboar when they can target down EXs. Now, I am still in a bit of trouble. I don't really have much going for me. Still don't have any other supporters. I don't have any way to get energy back, or even find energy. I just have the 1 in my hand. So unless I top deck, I'm still in a pretty bad position. He will Bolt Strike and take 2 prizes. He'll take the lead, and I'm going to be on the back foot. He's got 3 Eelektриks in play. That's not good for me at all. And what am I supposed to do here? Well, I'm going to cross my fingers and hope I top deck something. That's about the extent of my plan at this point. Fortunately, he put down that Sky Arrow Bridge so I can promote Rayquaza EX. It'll have free retreat now with that good old bridge in play. And let's see. All I can do here is kind of send up my Reshiram and buy some time. I don't have any other options. Hope he Bolt Strikes into it or something. I'm going to bench that Reshiram EX with an Eviolite, because I do feel like that will be useful coming up. It's the only thing that can deal with that Zekrom with the Eviolite. Brave Fire, it's not the best attack. Reshiram EX is actually widely regarded as the worst EX. But in this deck, you just need something to load your energy on so that they'll be safe for a turn. That way you just have to attach 1 time, the energy don't get discarded, and you can use your energy and your resources more wisely to clean up with your other attackers. Now, what is he going to do this turn? Definitely he should go for a Volt Bolt. That would be a wonderful option. He could knock out the Pignite, or he could hit my Rayquaza EX for 100. Either way, that's a decent plan. I actually probably would prefer hitting the Rayquaza for 100, but the problem is he knows I play Max Potion, so I could just get healed off, and it'll be a wasted attack. So he decides to go for the Pignite. That's a sure thing, and now he only has to knock out 1 EX and then 1 other Pokemon, which is pretty easy. Once again, I draw a whole lot of nothing, and I pass. There's no need to really Ultra Ball. I don't think there's anything I want, and I might need some of these cards later. I don't want to discard the Catcher or the Fire or the Mewtwo. I'm probably going to need all those. The Rare Candy at this point is probably a dead card. All my Tepigs are in the discard pile. I don't think Emboar will be knocked out. Who knows? It could be, but I don't think it will be. And now I really need to draw something within the next few turns. Actually, probably this turn to have a shot at this game. He's down to 3 prizes. I still have 5. And he's outraging me. That's going to put pressure on me. And hey, a Juniper. Okay. So now we are back in business. I'm still going to need a lot of stuff to go my way this turn. But my goal is going to be charge up Rayquaza and knock out his Raikou, because I do have the Catcher in my hand. So I'm actually going to Ultra Ball away the Mewtwo, just because I don't want to bench it. I know he plays Mewtwo. I saw it in his hand, and I saw it off of his random receiver, and he has benched 3 Eelektriks. So all it takes is a Mewtwo double colorless Catcher, and he'll knock out my Mewtwo, and I will lose. So I don't want to have that on my bench. I do have a Super Rod left in my deck, so I could get that later. And right now, I actually hit everything. Wow. I needed 4 more energy, one of them being a lightning, to pull this magic off. And I got 2 fire and an energy retrieval. Things might be turning around, folks. We went from nothing to absolutely everything I ever wanted, which is when Emboar can get scary. If I can get energy every turn, if I don't run into these snags all the time, and if I can keep powering up these attackers, there's nothing that can actually keep up with this deck. It's kind of like Magnavour back in the day, where if you actually did get everything going and you had enough energy, you would win the game just because you would knock everything out and nothing could stop you. So right now I actually have to burn 4 energy thanks to that Eviolite. It's really annoying, but that's going to get me 2 prizes. I'm going to tie up the game. And this puts my opponent in an awkward position. Where does he go from here? And wow, those were some great prizes as well. An energy retrieval and a fire energy. I also have that silent in my hand. So I can go ahead and search for 3 energy, and I can actually attack with Reshiram EX next turn. Things I have to be scared of at this point are, of course, Pokemon Catcher. And if he plays another Raikou EX, that could be trouble if he decides to knock out my Rayquaza EX with Volt Bolt. But the way things are going to go is he can't actually take a prize this turn unless he catches out Reshiram. There's nothing else he can really do to take a prize. And if he doesn't take a prize this turn, well, he's going to need a catcher to knock out a benched Pokemon, because I'm definitely going to retreat if he hits my active. If he were to knock out the Reshiram, then he won't be hitting my EXs, which means they'll probably live for the next turn. Basically what I'm getting at is he's going to have to use an EX eventually. Reshiram EX is actually really good against normal Zekrom when you have the Eviolite on, so you can just Brave Fire for 150. So actually when I had all those turns in a row where my Emboar was stuck active, I was just draw, pass, draw, pass, draw, pass. I think it was like 4, 5 turns maybe that I was just passing over and over. Now we're in a good position to win. And this is the power of Emboar, and the power of Rayquaza, and the EXs in general. I mean, let's be real, these EXs are ridiculous. They do a ton of damage, they have a ton of HP. The only problem is powering them up, and when you can manage to pull that off, that's great. So here I draw a Super Rod. I have an interesting decision on what I want to shuffle in. I'm not sure how many energy are actually left in my deck, so I want to do it before I play the Silent. Which I do want to do this turn, so I can power up Reshiram EX to Brave Fire. And I'm going to be in a good spot. Now, I could shuffle in either Mewtwo EX or Rayquaza EX. I know he plays Mewtwo. I haven't seen any sort of fire energy so far. So, I think the best option is actually going to be to shuffle Mewtwo back in my deck. That way if I get End, all I have to do is draw a Mewtwo and 2 energy, and I'll be able to X-Ball and win the game. I'm assuming he's going to have to go for Mewtwo soon, because I think he'll realize as well, I can't actually do well against Reshiram EX with Zekrom. Eventually, he's just going to power up a Rayquaza. I mean, he's going to plow through 2 of these Zekrams with the Reshiram EX. And then Rayquaza is going to clean up for the last prize. So, he's going to have to go for a big play this next turn. Otherwise, he's just going to fall behind and lose. The prize situation is in my favor right now. So, I will go ahead. I didn't have to waste an energy retrieval, which is really nice. And I don't want to waste that Bianca. I wish I could have played the Ultra Ball, but it was not worth discarding these cards, definitely. And I'll grab my prize, which is another Reshiram EX. Not that great. I believe I have 2 supporters prize still. Would have preferred to get one of those, but can't complain about my situation at all. If he doesn't end me, I think I win the game. There's just no way for him to really take advantage of what's on my board. I don't see a way he can really do that. Unless he has the catcher this turn, and then drops a Mewtwo with a ton of energy and a double colorless next turn to knock out the Reshiram EX. It's the only way I can see that happening. And even then, it'll be close, because I'll probably retreat to my other Reshiram EX and power it up. It'll come down to a Brave Fire flip, maybe, to see who wins. But number 1 is he has to have a catcher this turn. Number 2 will be the N. Put my hand down to 2 cards, and it'll depend on what I draw. I can see he's played 3 N's already, so he'd need to have a 4th one in his hand. I believe he's gone through 3 catchers as well, so he'd need to have the 4th one of that. Could be prized. He still has 3 prizes left, so there's a decent chance of that happening. And yep, here we go. Here comes Mewtwo. So he is just straight up going for it. That Tails on the Brave Fire is actually pretty painful. Now he's going to be able to knock out my Reshiram EX with X-Ball. Unfortunate, but hey, what can you do about it? And this is getting close. If he doesn't play an N, though, I'm going to win because I can just energy retrieval. And then Bianca will get me an energy, and I'll win the game. If he does N, I'm going to need to draw some pretty good cards. I do have a lot of good cards left in my deck, though. I do have a Bianca. I have plenty of energy. I have a Mewtwo in there that'll help. And I have at least 2 energy retrieval left, I believe. So I have plenty of stuff to pull off this magical knockout in the last turn. We'll just see whether or not I do it, though. So my opponent has loaded up his Mewtwo. That's 5 energy. That is pretty scary. Whenever Eelektrik can get 3 Eelektriks into play, you know you're in trouble because that's 3 energy they can just dump onto any Pokemon. And wow, what a perfect 2 cards. I draw a Bianca and a Fire. That means I can pretty much just draw into 3 energy and win, I think. We'll see, though. And it'll all depend on what I draw here. And hey, what do you know? I just draw right off the top. Energy retrieval. Okay, we're going to Dragon Burst for the game, folks. I just have to get back 2 Fire. I don't think there's an Eevee on his Mewtwo. If there was, that would be a bad way to lose. So I'm just going to go ahead. Inferno Fandango. I should just drop the 3 Fire. Hit that Mewtwo for 180, and somehow, someway, Emboar is going to win this game. This is just the power of Emboar against the EXs, and you can see I'm just taking a look, trying to see if there's an Eevee on there. The view is actually really hard to tell, and I have to make sure I discard the Fire energy, and there we go. Dragon Burst for 180. That will be the game. So wow. Even though I ran into that rough patch where I just was not drawing anything, I was just passing over and over, eventually I got to power up my Rayquaza up, or power up the Rayquaza enough times to go ahead and win. Now, if your opponent doesn't play Rayquaza, that's a pretty big deal. Nothing really knocks it out in one hit, except for other Dragon-type Pokemon. And as you can see there, Rayquaza EX is pretty good. So is Emboar, if you have everything in your hand. Really clunky deck, but when it all comes together, it's a work of art. So thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed that video. And that was a really competitive match. It's not too often you get to see a person who has a fully built competitive deck, but he had one, and that was a great game. So stay tuned to this channel. We'll have more games, more videos, all sorts of stuff coming up soon. I've been Pooka, and I'll see you guys next time.